Let's start with the markets and where we are in the economy, because as you know, markets go up, markets go down. President Trump has not been shy in claiming credit for the markets going up. Does he now get some blame because the markets are going down?
Well, there's always going to be some fluctuations. This is somewhat of a significant decline, but you look at where we've been. We've had, 8 years of strong economic expansion. That generally is a sign that it's going to be a change. The fact that we have the federal tax bill, I believe, gives us optimism about another sustained period of economic growth. And so despite the change in the market for now, which we hope is temporary, I see incredible good signs and optimism in the economy as a whole. In Arkansas, our companies are expanding. They're taking the benefit of the federal tax bill. They're either putting it in employee bonuses or they're expanding their jobs. And that's going to help us incredibly in terms of the economy. Consumer spending is up. In Arkansas, consumers still have confidence and our economy is growing. GDP growth is higher than the national average. So I'm very optimistic about where we're going.
So you've been in favor of tax cuts in Arkansas before the feds got into it. You were in that business before they were. At the same time, are you concerned at all about the timing of this? To have $1.5 trillion in fiscal stimulus when we still have a fair amount of accommodation on the monetary side, is there a danger of overheating the economy? Is that what the markets may be reacting to?
Well, I think I'm concerned, obviously, about inflation and interest rates. And I think the test is whether we can expand with this new tax bill and do it in a way that overcomes the drain on the deficit. As you know, the CBO scored it heavily there, but they did not count the dynamics of economic growth. We believe that will be higher growth that will offset that. So I think that's a test that we're going to watch in the coming year. But right now, I think there's room for optimism and reason for it, and hope it continues.
Does it worry you that the budget deficit could approach $1 trillion very, very soon now, and you could run out of fiscal options for the government to react to a downturn?
Sure, it worries anybody who's been in Congress.
But nobody talks about the deficit now.
They need to talk about it more. And by the way, the last time I was in Congress, the last time we had a balanced budget. So it's been way too long. And so sure, we need to talk about the deficit in terms of we've got to reduce it. We've got to get back to a balanced budget. We've got to have structural reform in Washington. There's a lot more that needs to be done. I hope that Congress can give some positive signs that we are going to address that. Again, I think the big test is whether this tax cut works in terms of expanding growth so that it does not expand the deficit. That is very, very important to us. And of course, I think the consumer spending and the inflationary growth is over-worried right now. I don't think that's going to happen. It hasn't been the pattern in the United States. And so if that can be controlled, even if interest rates tick up a little bit, I think we'll continue to expand.
Could trade tensions this year take away from the benefits of tax cuts?
If we don't handle it right, yes. And I've been a strong advocate because Arkansas is so dependent upon global trade, from agriculture being our #1 export, to the presence of Walmart, Tyson's, and our manufacturing that really is dependent upon that trade and opportunities to expand in the global marketplace. Very important. And so I agree with the president, and he's helped us because of his tough positions that have increased manufacturing opportunities to return to the United States. But if you don't manage it well, so we continue the emphasis upon that global trade and just negotiate a better position, then we could hurt ourselves.
So how confident are you that the president actually will not overplay his hand? Because some of the things he said has been pretty confrontational. What he's done, not so much. But as you say, in Arkansas, you've got NAFTA issues with agricultural exports. You've got potential problems with China if we ended up in a trade war with China, because you've got a lot of investment coming into Arkansas from China. So how concerned are you that we might push it too far?
Well, I've lived long enough that I remember that in the trade embargoes of the past, it's always agriculture that gets hurt the first. And so if we overplay our hand, if we start raising tariffs, at some point there's going to be retaliation. And that will hit agriculture first, and that would hurt us in Arkansas and our farming community. Is the president overplaying his hand? there's nothing, you always have to judge as president by actions and outcomes. And thus far, on actions and outcomes, he's still ahead of the game.
From your perspective, which is the bigger problem for the United States in terms of trade, China or NAFTA?
Well, the first one, of course, would be NAFTA. You look at Canada and Mexico, our leading trading partners, both in terms of agriculture, but the manufacturing integration with aerodynamics to the automobile industry. That's the most significant to keep that North American trade. And if China, they want to invest here in the United States in terms of manufacturing, they want to have access to the entire North America market. And not just the United States. And so it is very important that we continue that North American trade.
Now that President Trump has presented his immigration stance, he's sort of doubled down on what he wants to see from Congress. Who's going to move the negotiations forward from here? Is it the president or is it Congress when it comes to the details?
Actually, you see the president more engaged on this issue and providing a leadership role. He set forth very specific proposal to Congress, and in contrast to other issues where he said, Congress, this is what we want you to accomplish, you do it. So he is leading on this issue, and I think he set the goalpost right, which is let's address the Dreamer issue, and then let's address border security. What's in between should be negotiable. And so that's a good starting point. Congress needs to respond and act on this.
President Trump right now arriving in Cincinnati. Those are live pictures of President Trump, who's headed to a Schaeffer Corporation, which is a manufacturing company. He'll deliver remarks on his tax reform bill and continuing this conversation on what President Trump wants. Governor, when it comes to immigration, you've pointed out to some of those pillars that the president wants to see, but how realistic are they when we're also talking about a border wall? He definitely wants to see a wall, and also restricting family sponsorship, which is a no-go for many Democrats.
Well, it shouldn't be. I think it's negotiable, but it shouldn't be a no-go. And whenever you're talking about, first of all, you have to have the border security. That is an absolute for the president, and it should be. And he has leaned forward on the Dreamer issue and given our country what we need and saying you've got to address this. In between, we have legal immigration, and it should be negotiable as to what is the stream of that legal immigration. Is it going to be changing the family immigration part of it, or is it going to be changing the lottery system? That can be negotiable, but there needs to be reform of that. We need to increase, or at least we need to maintain that legal flow of immigration because it means so much to our economy, to the fabric of America. That is important, but it has to be by legal means. And I think that's what he's trying to articulate and shut off that flow of illegal immigration to our country. But you cannot reduce the overwhelming the legal side, because that would hurt our economy. That would change really the structure of the direction we're going.
Governor, you have a particular point of view on the security of the southern border. You were responsible for that under the Department of Homeland Security. What's realistic? What really should be done? I mean, we hear on the one hand, build a wall all the way across. Other people say that's nonsense. There's got to be other things we do, use of artificial intelligence, more border security. You know this world. So what really would work?
And it has to be a combination of security measures along the southern border. There's some places that physically you cannot actually put a physical wall. I believe the president understands that, and he's shown flexibility as to the type of wall, the areas in which you want to have that physical barrier. Other places, it's got to be surveillance, it's got to be electronics, it's got to be very sophisticated equipment, as well as human personnel. As years ago it was pointed out, you could build a $30 million wall and a $30 ladder can defeat it if it's not accompanied by other types of security measures. So it's got to be that combination. We also, and I think he's adjusted the numbers to where it's a reasonable amount that the Democrats can accept on that investment.
What is that reasonable amount? Because we hear, on the one hand, we hear few hundred million, sometimes from the Democrats, and we hear 25 billion from the president. What's a number that, to you, makes sense?
Well, I think the president's number is where it should be.
So it's going to take $25 billion.
I think it's going to take that kind of investment if you're going to start securing the southern border. And it's very important, though, it should not simply be in increasing the numbers of our of our Border Patrol and our agents out there that do an amazing job, but it can't just be that, because that's going to cost us for a long, long time in terms of human investment. It has to be a more sophisticated part of it, and it also has to be the e-verification of our employment system. So that's what pulls them in there, is that opportunity to get a job and not have sufficient verification. So it needs to be both the e-verification system and the investment along the border.
And just finally, let me touch on infrastructure, because this will require a lot of investment coming from states, localities, and private entities. Federal spending will not really be that much. How much more of the burden can you, as a state, take on?
Well, it has to be measured, and it's going to be more on the conservative side, because any additional investment is going to have to either come from private sector partnership or by some type of new fees or tax increases for highway and infrastructure, and the states don't want to particularly do that part of it. But the $200 billion, I believe it is, investment on infrastructure by the federal government is significant, and it can be maximized if the states do access that and partner with it. We want to be able to do, it's not just highways, this is talking about bridge construction, which is needed. It could be water projects, and combination of the federal investment with the state partnership and private sector can really spur that growth. I think it's important. It should be bipartisan support for that. I hope that Congress can do it, even though it might not be the $1 trillion investment that was originally mentioned.